I titled this mind map, Symbolism, a Language of the Subconscious. This discussion was brought forth upon reflection on earlier experiences when I transitioned into consulting as I left my IT business back in 2013. This particular quote right here holds the key to understandings about ourselves. And the realization of this quote was brought forth along the journey as I started to work more with the power of the subconscious mind, both with myself and working with others. It's from a book called The Hidden Power by Thomas Troward. And he says, to realize fully how much of our present daily life consists in symbols is to find the answer to the old question, what is truth? And in the degree in which we begin to recognize this, we begin to approach truth. The realization of truth consists in the ability to translate symbols, whether natural or conventional, into their equivalents. And the root of all the errors of mankind consists in the inability to do this, and in maintaining that the symbol has nothing behind it. The great duty incumbent on all who have attained to this knowledge is to impress upon their fellow men that there is an inner side to things, and that until this inner side is known, the things themselves are not known. So, prior to transitioning, I had a certain experience that I want to share so we can weave it into our discussion to help me understand, as well as share with others, the understanding that is deeper than what we've been talking about over the last few videos, and that is the symbolism behind the words, the communication, and so forth, and the impression that it has on the subconscious mind. So we look at traditional symbolism as logos or other kinds of symbols that are presented to us. What we like to do here is use the words or our communication symbolically so that it impresses the subconscious mind to create behavioral or transformational change within ourselves, such as the principle of autosuggestion that was discussed in Think and Grow Rich. Now, in 2012, I lived in a building that downstairs, they let us to use this room that they have. It was a meeting room. It was a beautiful meeting room with a lot of seating, big screen TV, and it was perfect for doing presentations. So I had an idea. I was building up a referral network in Toronto, and I said, I'm going to run events. And I set up a calendar on a website in which, at the end of the day, around 7 to 9 p.m., something like that, I was running these workshops. And they were different kinds of workshops. There was a workshops on using Facebook to grow your business. There was one on email marketing. There was one on different kinds of, let's say, business building and marketing strategies and techniques. And because I had access to the room for free, I would hold these events, and it really didn't matter if 2 people showed up or 4 or 5 people showed up. I would run these events because I recognized a number of things. Whoever paid the very nominal fee to show up to these events had businesses, or they were starting businesses. Thus, they probably needed additional products or services to support their business, such as email marketing advice, agency work, setting up their websites, setting up their email lists, teaching them how to market online via social media, running ads, and so forth. I had a group of contractors that I work with, and I recognized that I could set up some partnerships so that on top of the very nominal fee that I would charge for these workshops, by building a relationship and communicating with these individuals in a way that helps them understand the power of these different technologies and how to integrate it, they would be stimulated to ask me the question, can you help me integrate the stuff that you're talking about into my business? Such as the case, I would say about 80 to 90% of the time for the students that would attend these workshops. And I did this for about a month. So then after the end of the workshops, we would talk and we would structure out some deals to put in these systems. And a lot of time these companies, including the contractors, would have a referral fee program in place in which they would pay me referral fees, sometimes ongoing in nature, if I would introduce their product or service to my clients. And so this ended up becoming very profitable, and it was starting to grow because not only were the workshops really good and beneficial for those that showed up also referred other people and said, hey, there's this guy, he's running these workshops downtown right by Union Station, easy access, a couple hours, they're pretty laid back, and he's quite knowledgeable and he's got a lot of business experience. So these started to open up more doors. I would meet more people, they would bring me into their masterminds, and I would do events in their masterminds, and this process would continue. I then started to communicate this to my consulting clients of how, that was one story, but there was many different stories of how business was growing, and it seemed to grow with ease at a certain phase of my journey. And I would share with them these strategies that I would do, which a lot of times they were very intuitive and organic, but they made sense from a business building principle standpoint, and I would share it with them. After getting deeper into the consulting, I recognized that they were interpreting what I was proposing from a perspective of disempowerment. In other words, they couldn't believe that they could do the same thing. It would conjure up, as I would share with them these experiences, in their mind's eye, certain scenes, or they would symbolically represent what I'm suggesting to them in a way that they can't do it, they're not good enough, and so forth. I then further understood the power behind the words and our communication, and how individuals symbolically interpret what we are suggesting at a subconscious level. So I went further down the route of developing my communication skills because I recognized that I had the ability to do this. But the next stage of my journey as I went into consulting was to be able to translate this over to others in a certain communication style, using words a certain way, that the other individual would symbolically interpret as, I believe I can do this. This is something that I can do. So thus this idea of the symbolic nature of how we interpret words or communication became a deeper fascination for me. And then as I continued going down this pathway into public speaking, it brought me into deeper understanding about the symbolic nature of communication. And I started to go all the way back to ancient alchemy, studying symbolism, and recognize that as far back as we go, as human beings go, symbolism has been one of the core ways of communicating to the subconscious mind. So he also says, in the wildest sense, everything is a symbol of that which constitutes its inner being. And all nature is a gallery of arcana, revealing great truths to those who can decipher them. But there is a more precise sense in which our current life is based upon symbols in regards to the most important subjects that can occupy our thoughts. And so on through every degree, from the lowest depths of ignorance to the greatest heights of intelligence. A man's life must always be the exact reflection of that particular stage which he has reached in the perception of the divine nature of his own relation to it. And as we approach the full perception of truth, so the life principle within us expands. The old bonds and limitations which had no existence in reality fall off from us, and we enter into regions of light, liberty, and power, of which we had previously no conception. It is impossible, therefore, to overestimate the importance of being able to realize the symbol for a symbol, and being able to penetrate to the inner substance which it represents. Life itself is to be realized only by the conscious experience of its livingness in ourselves and it is the endeavor to translate these experiences into terms which shall suggest a corresponding idea to others that gives rise to all symbolism. See, I recognize that over the journey of entrepreneurship from 2009 to 2012, I was changing within myself as a result of working with this information, as a result of the experience. We call this the rearrangement of the mind. I was changing. And as a result of these changes within myself, I would be able to recognize certain patterns. And I would be able to see these opportunities that would exist, and one thing would lead to a next. One business idea would be seen into completion, and it would open up more doors for further businesses, new ways of acquiring clients, referrals, and so forth. Because on the journey, I was changing my interpretation to the different aspects of the journey, so that when I came across certain kinds of marketing information or business books, I then started to actuate that information, put it into practice without any internal resistance, because I didn't look at what they were communicating as something that I couldn't do. I am not good enough. It is not possible for me, as we discussed this in last Thursday's video. This symbolic interpretation of the information being suggested went in and impressed my subconscious mind, and as I was doing these presentations at that event, I would notice that I would automatically express in a way. I would go into this free-flowing style of expression, and it would speak very deeply to the audience, and they would translate over to, hey, I could do what he's talking about in my business, as well as he's probably a great person that can help me, or at least guide me in the right direction to integrate this into my business. So it opened up the door for future business deals. And then, just like that, I would see the connections between others that I'd met, and I would form partnerships, and the business would continue to grow. Now, when I propose these same strategies, when I would communicate in the earlier stages these exact things that I was doing over to those that I was consulting with, I didn't know it until a certain stage in my consulting journey, that they were interpreting it based on their map of reality. In other words, they were interpreting it from perspectives in which they felt that they couldn't do those things. I started out in the same position that they did, where this kind of stuff seemed impossible to me. But as I continued to day-to-day show up each day, work on my business, change my inner conversations, think a certain way, change my beliefs and interpretations that were inaccurate, I would symbolically interpret different business strategies as, oh, I can do this. So then what happened is I found that it was easier for me to integrate when I would go to certain conversations with people, and they would share with me their business strategies. I noticed sometimes that I would have a conversation with somebody and they were earning significantly more, and they would share certain things that they were doing in their business, and then within the next few weeks, my revenues would jump up. It seems to me that I was a lot more suggestible, but upon deeper reflection, I realized that I was changing certain interpretations in regards to that information symbolically from the perspective of I can do what they're doing. Now, this is something that I have been discussing all throughout the videos, is that if you come across a person or you consume some information from an individual that is in a, let's say, position of authority, and they appear to have a certain level of success, it's important to recognize that it is possible for you as well to achieve that. And if you have internal resistance surrounding the idea that you too can achieve that level of success in your chosen area, whatever it may be, then that is grounds for cause and effect reflection. to recognize that based on what they are communicating, and a lot of times they're even saying, hey, you could do exactly what I'm doing. We could be symbolically interpreting that as it's not possible for me. So what we're doing is we're translating communication into symbolic interpretation, and we're assuming those interpretations of ourselves. That information is going into our subconscious mind, and we are seeing reality from those perspectives. If a person begins to identify more with, I can do what he's doing or she's doing, or I too can have that level of business success, it's possible for me. They start to believe it through this kind of internal dialogue, this kind of inner conversation. Those words will translate into the symbolic equivalent, impress the subconscious mind, and the person will then begin to see those opportunities. A little bit more so every day, they'll see those opportunities. And equally as profound, they will begin to move forward with those opportunities. They'll find themselves now not having that internal resistance. And then they will understand to a higher degree, as I had understood over the years of consulting, what we learned from neurolinguistic programming, which is the meaning of the message is the response that follows. Very important to reflect upon this. The meaning of the message is the response that follows. So when you're reading a personal development book, or you're reading a business book, or you're reading some kind of information put together by an author or somebody that has produced success, are you interpreting it from the perspective of, I as well can do what this person is doing? And as a matter of fact, because I have a very distinct personality and style and individuality, I could do it in my own way that will be even more personalized and even more precise, thus bringing forth the success that is individualized to who I really am. That's the kind of interpretation that we want to have symbolically. Now, Joseph Murphy says this really well in regards to wealth, prosperity, and money. Because one of the reasons why I bring it up is I found that there is interpretations regarding prosperity, wealth, and money that seems to create internal symbolic interpretation of those words, like wealth, money, and prosperity, in which a person may identify with from the perspective of external locus of control, such as, oh, other people can do it, but I can't do it. I'm not good enough. I don't deserve it, and so forth. What we want to do is recognize that meaning in regards to the messages that we get related to wealth, prosperity, and money, and see the response that we are generating, the reaction to it, and recognize that you are not that reaction. You are transcendent to. We give the meaning a lot of times unconsciously. And while this meaning may have been something we integrated with, even believed to be true in earlier stages of our journey, we can release it via inner dialogue, imagining the ideal, keeping our attention on what is in harmony and in relation to our vision. And we'll start to notice is we will begin to change our relationship with those attributes. So Joseph Murphy says, your subconscious mind is never short of ideas. So remember this, your subconscious mind is never short of ideas. Any idea that suggests that the infinite source of resources within, as far as ideas go, is not possible, we want to exclude that idea out of consciousness. And such as when I had the conversations in earlier stages of my consulting, upon reflection, I realized that, okay, what we're going to need to do is have conversations about what they believe about the strategies. What are they interpreting in regards to what is being proposed to them? And as we continue to have those conversations, we started to realize that they didn't believe it was possible to generate ideas from within. The relationship and connection with intuition and their inner voice. They didn't know it was possible. They thought the answers were always outside of them. And as we've been discussing, a little bit more so every day, they go from, as a result of working with this information, from the answers are outside of me to, oh, I'm starting to find the answers within myself. Or I got an idea, but I seem to have resistance towards seeing this idea into completion, starting this business. Oh, wait a second. I'm going to find my beliefs and interpretations in regards to this idea and change it, such as what I discussed in my subconscious mind program. If you're interested in that, I'll put a link in the description. Identifying these interpretations, beliefs, assumption, and changing it using the subconscious mind work, knowing that these interpretations are symbolic representations of how the subconscious mind is going to bring forth. What we want is ideal. And you don't have to be perfect at this. We get better at it with practice in regards to working with the subconscious mind every day. So he says, there are within it an infinite number of ideas ready to flow into your conscious mind and appear as cash in your pocketbook in countless ways. Now, this is something where in the earlier stages of the journey, maybe about 15 or 20 years ago, I would have had a lot of internal resistance reading that. The idea that there are infinite number of ideas ready to flow into my conscious mind and appear as cash in my pocket in countless ways. See, I interpreted reality from it's not possible from many different sources of information for myself, that information was conjuring up as my reaction to these kinds of statements. Now, we realize upon going down the entrepreneurial journey, the business building journey, that there really are many different combinations and permutations for bringing forth wealth, prosperity, money, revenues into your business. There's many different business models, techniques, strategies, and different combinations, all based on sound principles. And to be able to reveal those, we want to release from the interpretations that seem to throttle those ideas, which has been what we've been discussing. He says, this process will continue to go on in your mind regardless of whether the stock market goes up or down, or whether the pound, sterling, or dollar drops in value. Your wealth is never truly dependent on bonds, stocks, or money in the bank. These are really only symbols, necessary and useful, of course, but only symbols. And then he goes on to say, the point I wish to emphasize is that if you convince your subconscious mind that wealth is yours and that it is always circulating in your life, you will always and inevitably have it, regardless of the form it takes. So we've been speaking about this, prosperity consciousness. And so to relate it over to symbolism, he says money is a symbol. Money is a symbol of exchange. So this is something that I know myself and many of us, we weren't taught to look at money as something that we are symbolically putting meaning to. And money is conjuring up certain symbolic meaning within ourselves, which is stimulating the subconscious mind and expressing accordingly. Either from a perspective of I deserve and I can have this prosperity, which reveals itself more so every day, or I don't deserve or I'm not good enough to have this prosperity, recognizing that money is a symbol. As he says here, when your blood is circulating freely in your body, you are healthy. When money is circulating freely in your life, you are economically healthy. Money has taken many forms as a medium of exchange down through the centuries, such as salt, beads, and trinkets of various kinds. So all throughout history, we've been assigning different meaning to something that is designed to exchange value, fair value exchange, a product or service in exchange for something else. And the way we do it is through money or any other kind of its equivalent. And because we have allowed certain symbolic interpretations in regards to the symbol of money to go into our subconscious mind from a place of disempowerment. We seem to have less of it show up in innovative and creative ways because of our relationship with it. And what we want to do is go beyond money and understand that it is symbolism. Then the area that is worth investing in is building this relationship in regards to money, changing the conversation around, the inner conversation surrounding money, such as it is a form of fair value exchange. It's a fair mutual exchange. Your product or service for the other person's money. As we began to work in that area, change the symbolic meaning surrounding money. And I did this with myself because I recognized that in the earlier stages of this journey, I had a symbolic relationship with money that would not be one that would bring forth the kind of prosperity that I desired and continue to develop more so every day as a result of working with the business building information. I wouldn't find flow if I didn't change this relationship. And upon changing my relationship with money and prosperity and wealth, what I noticed is that it was easier for me to find these connections. It was easier for me to do the sales. It was easier for me to do the marketing. I didn't have the hang-ups that I once did surrounding asking for money. Now, this is not just true for money. This is true for any form of prosperity. Take any word that represents what you desire. Find the symbolic interpretation, and if needed, change your relationship to that word, to whatever it is. And you will notice that you will bring forth more of what that word symbolically represents to you. Because what we're working with here is the power of the subconscious mind, which really is the premise of so much personal development information. If you go and read Think and Grow Rich, if you study the Neville Goddard information, if you study Joseph Murphy or any of this information, even if you go into NLP and sales training, you're going to find that a lot of it is about changing our subconscious relationship to both the selling process, prosperity, and so forth. And this was heavily stimulated within me in regards to wealth and prosperity by working with The Stranger's Secret by Earl Nightingale, because he articulates it really well in there, in building a healthy relationship with prosperity, wealth, and money, and so forth. So, neurolinguistic programming really helped me understand the symbolism that I was assigning to certain words, certain communication, certain aspects of reality, and how this information or the symbolic interpretation has been impressing on my subconscious mind, understanding the symbolism as a language of the subconscious, and working with two important elements here, which we call presuppositions, which I trust will be very helpful for you. Number one, the map is not the territory. So this presupposition means the map is not the territory is the idea that we respond to our internal map of reality and externalize it onto the world in relation to money, prosperity, and so forth. We represent our own interpretation in our relationship to these areas, and its expression is very apparent in our behaviors, in our communication, in the words that we choose. So the inner conversations, as we spoke about in the last video, reveals what we think about ourselves, how we believe reality to work. And as we express using these words, we can go in and find the symbolism behind it so we can understand what's really going on in our subconscious. And when we communicate with others, and this is something that I was suggesting over the last handful of videos, there's response And another presupposition that can help us is the meaning of the message is the response that follows. So what is the response? What are we thinking? Are we being reactive? Some examples might be a person runs a campaign, and this was something that we used to do in the earlier stages when we'd work with clients. We'd set up an email campaign. They would email out to their list. Could have been a few thousand, 10, 15,000. And they wouldn't get the response that they wanted. They wouldn't get the kind of sales that they wanted. We would pause and we'd say, the meaning of the message is the response that follows. And they would say, well, we didn't get the response that we wanted. And I say, well, that's the meaning. We want to look at it from the perspective of how do we react to it? Do you see it as an opportunity that you can find certain things that you can optimize? Could be the offer, could be the positioning, could be a lot of things in regards to, let's say, marketing best practices. You want the success. And they'd say yes. And there are aspects of the journey to bring forth the success, such as this. And this is the thing that you know you have to do. And they would say yes. Wouldn't you want a more flow-based journey to the destination? And they would say yes. So upon reflection, in different areas of your business where your revenue is, let's say, consistent, was there not a period of optimization leading to it? And they would say yes. And we'd say the same is to be said about this. So we have some interpretations in regards to sending out emails to get clients. And we can change those interpretations. So we'd get into conversation, and then what would happen is they would find this internal peace. And they would say, oh, here's what we can do. Let's do this again. Let's run this other campaign. Let's do this. Let's change something around. All of a sudden, like Joseph Murphy suggested, the subconscious mind, which is never short of ideas, start to reveal these ideas, which would then translate them into running successful email campaigns. We're the ones assigning meaning to reality. And as a result of what we are assigning meaning to, we are, as we discussed in the last video, going down that track and revealing reality accordingly. And what we want is this flow-based journey to the destination. So let's tie this in now into what we learned. The symbolism, the meaning that we associate to communication and words is revealed by the responses we get, both the responses that we get from those that we serve, as well as our reactivity or proactivity, or what we polarize to. And what we want to do is change any kind of interpretation, unnecessarily so, that causes us to interpret the responses that we get from the perspective of impossible. Watch the video that I did last Thursday. As we change these interpretations, what we will notice is we will find the opportunities. We will find the optimizations. You will get the ideas. They will show up. And as you begin to make this a habit, then you'll notice that the saying that we always say, everything you touch turns to gold. Because at that point, you look at whatever it is that you do as something that is going to give some kind of response, and from there, you'll be able to adjust accordingly. We'll find the symbolism. Whatever kinds of responses you get, and the responses doesn't necessarily have to be words and communication. It could be whatever kind of five sensory response you get. We are symbolically interpreting the five sense integration, the information via the five senses. And we're conjuring up in our imagination either visions of possibility or visions of impossible. And what we want is to stimulate more visions of possible. And thus we do this by recognizing that what we've been suggesting, the reactivity is an opportunity. And the reactivity is an opportunity to reveal the symbolism based on the information that we are consuming. And we can change that information, or we can change how we relate to that information. We have the power to do this within ourselves. And we do this by working with the subconscious mind work. Because as I mentioned earlier, I would have the conversation with them of the different things that I did, but they weren't able to do it. But then as we started to get deeper into conversation and changing the relationship symbolically to what was being communicated, they began to do those things. Now, this is how we go through our journey to bring forth any kind of success. Look at the success that you've brought forth in your life. Look at the changes that you have made in your life. You will notice that this is the same process repeating itself again and again and again. And what we want, if we want to, is encourage this process. And this is another reason why I always say that I enjoyed the journey as much as the destination, because these are the opportunities to purify the mind. So let's go ahead and conclude this with an affirmation. This is something that we'll be further discussing, and I trust that you found this to be helpful on your journey. We could say, I realize more so that I have the ability to recognize the symbolism behind communication. I'm able to then understand how the symbolism behind the communication, behind the words, is stimulating my subconscious mind to respond accordingly. I'm able to change my relationship to the communication. As a result of changing my relationship to the communication from the perspective of ideal in harmony with my vision, I automatically find myself stimulated into a response that generates from my subconscious mind the ideas to work with that information in a creative way to bring forth my success. I notice this increases every day as I build a deeper relationship with symbolism. I understand the power of symbolism and recognize its importance in my journey of building my relationship with my subconscious mind. On this journey, I find, as a result of working with this idea, a higher degree of flow, inner peace, knowing that I have the power to change my internal relationship to the different aspects of the journey and do so in a way that brings forth results on the journey to realizing my vision from a place of love, harmony, and flow. If you would like a copy of this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.